It was during one of the most devastating natural disasters South Carolina had seen, Hurricane Florence in September 2018, when two women lost their lives, not to the storm, but to a tragic decision made by a law enforcement officer. This is the heartbreaking story of Officer Stephen Flood, the deputy who ignored warnings, drove into danger, and ultimately ended up behind bars for the deaths of two women who were supposed to be under his protection. Wendy Newton and Nicolette Green were not criminals. They were mental health patients being transported for psychiatric evaluation. They were shackled, not because they were dangerous, but because of standard procedures that didn't account for human dignity or emergencies. Officer Stephen Flood and another deputy, Joshua Bishop, were assigned to transport the women from one hospital to another. But as the rain pounded down and rivers swelled from the storm, danger was everywhere. Roads were closed, barricades were up, GPS systems blared flood warnings. Authorities had declared it a state of emergency. Despite all of this, Officer Flood chose to ignore at least 6 different barricades. He drove the van, a non-emergency vehicle, directly into Marion County, into a deeply flooded road. In the back of the van, Wendy and Nicolette began to panic. Water was rising fast. They were locked inside, unable to free themselves, and soon the van was swept off the road by rushing floodwaters. Trapped in the back, shackled and screaming, the women could do nothing but beg for help. The officers tried desperately to break into the back of the van, but they failed. Emergency responders arrived, but by then it was too late. Both women drowned inside that van, alone, scared and helpless. The public outcry was immediate. How could a trained officer drive into such danger? Why were two non-violent women shackled in such condition? Stephen Flood was arrested and charged with 2 counts of involuntary manslaughter and 2 counts of reckless homicide. In court, the prosecution laid out a devastating timeline. Flood had disobeyed orders, ignored protocol, and disregarded basic safety. His defense argued he made a mistake, but the jury saw it differently. In May 2022, Officer Stephen Flood was found guilty on all charges and was sentenced to 18 years in prison, 9 years for each woman's death, to be served consecutively. Today, Stephen Flood is no longer an officer. He is an inmate. And while justice was served in the eyes of the court, the pain for the families of Wendy Newton and Nicolette Green remains. This wasn't just a case of poor judgment. It was a catastrophic failure in duty, accountability, and human compassion. These women needed care, not cuffs, not cages, and certainly not death. Their story is a chilling reminder of what can happen when protocol overshadows common sense, and when officers forget the humanity of the people they're supposed to protect. Michael Dotro was a veteran police officer, someone trusted to protect and serve. But in 2013, he made a choice that shocked his department, his community, and the entire country. This is the true story of how a New Jersey cop tried to kill his superior officer by setting his house on fire, all because of a disciplinary action. At the time, Michael Dotro was a member of the Edison Police Department in New Jersey. He had been disciplined before, written up, suspended, warned, for various misconduct issues including excessive force and unprofessional behavior. But when his superior, Captain Mark Anderko, recommended that Dotro undergo a psychological evaluation for his continued misconduct, something snapped. On May 20th, 2013, around 4:00 a.m., Captain Anderko's house in Monroe Township, where he lived with his wife and 2 young children, was engulfed in flames. A fire had been deliberately set. Investigators later found 5 gas cans at the scene, placed intentionally to burn the house down while the family slept inside. Miraculously, the family escaped unharmed, but what came next would stun even seasoned detectives. Evidence quickly led to one of their own, Michael Dotro. Surveillance footage, phone records, and even purchases made by Dotro, including gas cans, linked him directly to the arson. He was arrested just 5 days after the fire. The charges were severe: 5 counts of attempted murder, aggravated arson, and official misconduct. He was also later charged in separate corruption investigations involving illegal traffic ticket dismissals and abuse of power within the department. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Dotro pleaded guilty in 2016. He admitted to trying to kill his superior and his family by setting their house on fire in the middle of the night. His motive? Revenge, pure and simple. He didn't want to face a psychological exam. He didn't want to lose his badge. So instead of fighting through proper channels, he tried to murder his way out. Michael Dotro was sentenced to 20 years in prison. He must serve at least 17 years before becoming eligible for parole. The community of Edison was left in disbelief that one of their own, someone sworn to uphold the law, had tried to destroy lives out of personal spite. His case became one of the most disturbing examples of corruption, vengeance, and abuse of power within a police force. Not only did he attempt murder, he did it with premeditation and planning, using his knowledge as a law enforcement officer to try and cover it up. Today, Dotro remains behind bars. His name is now infamous, a warning of how unchecked power, when mixed with personal vendettas, can turn protectors into predators. This is not just a story about a rogue cop. It's a story about ego, entitlement, and how justice eventually caught up with someone who believed he was above the law. In January 2019, a high-speed police chase through the streets of Newark, New Jersey, ended in gunfire, and later, criminal charges against one of the officers involved. That officer was Jovanny Crespo, and what made this case extraordinary wasn't just the shooting, but the body cam footage, the public outrage, and the fact that for once, a police officer faced prosecution for a fatal shooting while on duty. Officer Jovanny Crespo had been with the Newark Police Department for just over 2 years when the incident took place. On the night of January 28, 2019, police attempted to pull over a car for running a stop sign. Inside were 2 men, Gregory Griffin, the driver, and his passenger, Andrew Dixon. Officers suspected the men were armed. Griffin refused to stop, leading police on a high-speed pursuit through city streets. Multiple officers were involved, but Crespo took matters further. During the chase, Crespo jumped into a police vehicle driven by another officer, and while standing partially out of the window, he fired his weapon multiple times at the fleeing car, not once, but 3 times, at 3 different locations, hitting both men. Body cam footage later released to the public showed Crespo acting without clear visual confirmation of a weapon and without direct orders to use lethal force. While police claimed they believed there was a gun in the car, critics questioned the urgency and legality of Crespo's actions, especially given that the suspect vehicle was speeding away, not shooting back. Gregory Griffin, the driver, was struck in the head and later died at the hospital. Andrew Dixon was also shot but survived. A firearm was indeed recovered from the car afterward, but Crespo's actions were still ruled as criminally excessive. In a highly unusual move, Essex County prosecutors charged Crespo with 6 criminal counts, including aggravated manslaughter, and assault. His indictment shocked many in law enforcement, while civil rights activists called it a step toward police accountability. At the heart of the case was the question, was Crespo justified in using deadly force while the suspects were fleeing, or did he act recklessly, like a vigilante behind a badge? Crespo's defense argued that he believed the men were armed and dangerous and posed a threat to the public. Prosecutors said he violated training, policy, and basic legal standards. He wasn't the primary officer. He wasn't authorized to shoot, and he certainly wasn't in immediate danger when he opened fire. The case drew national attention because criminal prosecutions of on-duty police officers remain rare, even in fatal shootings. As of the latest updates, Crespo's trial has been pending, with delays due to legal motions and appeals. The outcome could set a precedent in how body cam footage is used in court, and how far officers can go when using deadly force during a pursuit. He was supposed to uphold the law, a trusted narcotics officer with the Houston Police Department, but behind the badge, Noe Juarez was working for the very criminals he was sworn to fight. This is the real-life story of how one officer crossed the line from law enforcement to organized crime. Noe Juarez wasn't just any police officer. He worked in Houston's narcotics division, one of the most sensitive areas in law enforcement. Officers in this unit are trained to go after drug dealers, cartel associates, and criminal networks. But Juarez didn't just look the other way. He became part of the problem. In 2015, a federal investigation revealed that Officer Juarez was working with a violent Mexican drug cartel. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, Juarez used his police access and resources to help the cartel import and distribute large amounts of cocaine and marijuana across the United States, including Houston, New Orleans, and Atlanta. But it didn't stop there. He provided cartel members with police intelligence, run license plate checks, and even supplied them with tactical gear, like bulletproof vests and weapons, normally only accessible to law enforcement. In essence, he was arming drug traffickers, all while wearing a badge. Investigators eventually tied Juarez to a major drug trafficking ring that was shipping hundreds of kilograms of cocaine across state lines. One of the key pieces of evidence, Juarez's communications with cartel members intercepted by federal agents. They showed him offering assistance, selling equipment, and even warning criminals about upcoming police raids. In 2015, Noe Juarez was arrested and later convicted in federal court. The charges included conspiracy to distribute narcotics, conspiracy to possess firearms in furtherance of a drug trafficking crime, providing material support to a drug cartel. In 2018, Juarez was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison. The judge made it clear, Juarez had not only broken the law, he had betrayed his oath and endangered the lives of honest officers who were risking everything to fight the same drug trade he was helping to grow. The Noe Juarez case stands out because it shows just how deep corruption can go when someone inside the system decides to sell their soul for profit and power. This wasn't just one dirty cop. This was an officer weaponizing the system to benefit a transnational criminal empire. Today, Juarez remains behind bars. Another example of how unchecked authority can be twisted into criminal influence. His case reminds us that sometimes the most dangerous criminals don't come from the outside. They're already inside the system. He was a sheriff's deputy, a husband, a trusted figure in his Louisiana community. But in 2019, the nation was stunned when Dennis Perkins was arrested, not for corruption or misconduct, but for something far darker, far more disturbing. This is the horrifying true story of Dennis Perkins, the police officer who became one of the most reviled figures in recent criminal history. Dennis Perkins served as a lieutenant with the Livingston Parish Sheriff's Office in Louisiana. To the outside world, he appeared to be a respectable law enforcement officer, married to Cynthia Perkins, a middle school teacher. But behind closed doors, the couple was hiding a nightmare. In October 2019, authorities uncovered a massive and sickening child sex abuse ring involving both Dennis and Cynthia. After a lengthy investigation, the two were arrested on 150 charges, including child rape, child pornography, obstruction of justice, and sexual abuse of minors. But what made headlines and shocked the nation were the details of what they did while wearing uniforms and working in positions of trust. Dennis and Cynthia Perkins were accused of creating child pornography, sexually abusing juveniles, and in one of the most revolting acts ever made public, lacing cupcakes served to Cynthia's students with bodily fluids. Yes, she was a school teacher, and he helped her contaminate food served to children. Authorities later stated they had uncovered hundreds of photos, videos, and evidence linking the couple to these acts, including devices hidden inside their home and disturbing footage found on digital drives. The community went into shock. Parents demanded answers. Schools reviewed protocols. The sheriff's department denounced Perkins, stating they were disgusted, sickened, and heartbroken over what one of their own had done. In 2022, Cynthia Perkins agreed to testify against her ex-husband as part of a plea deal. She admitted her role and was sentenced to 41 years in prison, with no chance of parole. Her testimony helped prosecutors build an airtight case against Dennis. Then in 2023, Dennis Perkins pleaded guilty to multiple counts of child rape, child pornography, and other felonies. The judge handed down a sentence of 100 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Perkins showed no emotion in court, but his victims, many of whom were minors, some of whom had no idea they were being exploited, were left with scars that may never fully heal. And the trust that once existed between officer and community was shattered.